The trade union movement's always been very outward-looking and international in its attitude and its policies, and we have always taken a keen interest in solidarity with particularly trade unionists involved in other areas. I was the official of a predecessor of UCU, University and College Union, back in the 1980s, responsible for the union's international work. And Fobzu and what was then known as the World University Service decided to mount a study visit to the West Bank and Gaza in collaboration with Bennett University. And in 1989, in the early stages of the First Intifada, my union general secretary decided we should participate. We hadn't at that time as a union got a policy on Palestine, but it was bubbling up as an issue within the trade union movement. And I went on the delegation with a number of other people from other education unions and other parts of the education circles that we were working with. And it was an extremely moving and stirring visit, which everybody came away from thinking that they must go back and do things within the organisations that they were working in. And that set me working within my union, and there was a network of people who were doing similar things in their own unions. And a regular contact with Fobzu arose out of that. The first trip in 1989 was when the Intifada was ongoing, the First Intifada, and I think all the delegation was struck very quickly both by the levels of oppression and difficulty the Palestinian education system was working under, but also by the incredible sense of optimism and a belief that the First Intifada was going to succeed in some terms. Coming to the more particular things about Bennett, the main gates of Bennett were closed and had a Israeli military picket on them, and we were led round by some back way and in via the sort of service area, and went into the university, and it was so striking that there were all these beautiful buildings and there were equipment and books and everything inside just gathering dust, and it was really very painful. But again, the ingenuity of the staff in terms of teaching in clandestine ways, in homes, in public places, even in cars, was quite amazing, and all of them were doing it against the background that they would be facing one sort or other of punishment if they were caught. These closures were happening to all the higher education institutions in Palestine in an arbitrary way, and often with no set reason or a very implausible reason, and with no clear date for reopening. So everybody was living not only with the immediate effects but also with the uncertainty. And planning academic courses and so on was incredibly difficult. Obviously students were sometimes facing study for a number of years to get what should have been a 3 or 4 year qualification. And that was all against the background of the living conditions that people faced in their homes and so on, where the level of Israeli punishments that we saw meted out for whole families when one member was suspected of doing something, for example, were dreadful. I mean, the knocking down of houses, the tearing up of family olive groves that had been there for centuries and so on, was extraordinary and really painful. It was my first time of seeing anything like that in a sort of conflict zone, and for that reason, I guess, it made a particularly deep impression. We saw educational institutions from higher education down to nursery level. At every level, the institutions were all under incredible pressure. The Fobzu delegation was formed with a view to bringing solidarity and encouragement to the Palestinian organisations with whom we were in contact. As a trade union delegation, we obviously made particular efforts to talk with the teachers' trade unions, and we made successful contacts with them, and they were often lasting in that we had regular communication with them afterwards. One of the other bits of collaboration that we did with UCU and Education International of producing a substantial report on academic freedom in a number of countries facing difficulty, one of which was Palestine. The main form of solidarity for a number of years that we were able to deliver in Palestine was essentially money. It has to be said. We helped support, for example, a small women's advice centre in Gaza with money, and we, on the second visit I went on, we visited them, and they were incredibly grateful for a relatively small amount of money. I mean, that's one of the things that we emphasise to our members, that in a situation like Palestine, a relatively small amount of money goes a long way, but also it's a concrete act of solidarity that people can relate to. I see solidarity as a key element of trade union activity in terms of making people realise that we are, well, as workers, as ordinary people in society, that we are all part of a common community. We all share all sorts of values, and where some part of the largest of humanity is having facing oppression or hunger or whatever, that it is our people's duty, but certainly trade union members' duty, to try and help them. I think that everybody should have that solidarity gene in them, as it were. I became a Fobzu trustee in the early 90s. Fobzu has been a player in terms of British appreciation of the situation in Palestine for its 40-year life. It has kept the flag flying, if you like, in difficult times, and has provided a concrete, positive locus for practical support. In looking at your website, I have felt very encouraged by the way in which it's substantially more focused on Palestinian representation, and also that what I had hoped to deliver some years before has now been really very successfully achieved in terms of the good relationship with UCU that is developing concrete results like the excellent programme of lectures. One of the essential roles of Fobzu is obviously material support for staff and students in the university. It's clear that any support for Fobzu is support not just for the site, but for the university system as a whole, and indeed the education system in Palestine and the West Bank as a whole.